Okay, so look, we got to talk about something real quick. If you went to the website and clicked on slides under my talk, those are not my slides, okay? That was like my working outline. I did not know what was going to be posted. I saw it last night. I had a panic attack, had to do some meditation before bed. So these are my real slides. So part of me is like, nobody came because they saw those slides. They were a hot mess, and they're like, I'm not going to that talk. So anyway, these are my real slides. We will post them later. But in the next 40 minutes, we're going to talk about what the science says about non-nutritive sweeteners. And I have no financial or relevant financial disclosures. So today we're going to review what we used to believe about artificial sweeteners and what the science says now. We're going to talk about what is considered acceptable intake of artificial sweeteners, how to translate this research into individual recommendations for your patients, and how to differentiate between artificial sweeteners, natural extracts, and sugar alcohols. Your learning objectives for today, I'm just going to leave those there for a hot second, and we're going to move on. All right, so the types of sweeteners. We've got non-nutritive sweeteners. We also refer to them as artificial sweeteners. This is aspartame, sucralose, ACE-K or asulfame-K, neotame, advantame. Our natural sweeteners are stevia, monk fruit. I really didn't know where to put allulose, so I kind of italicized it there. But if you don't know a lot about allulose, it's a naturally occurring sugar. It's pretty rare. It's found in figs, raisins, wheat, maple syrup, molasses. It was FDA approved back in 2019, so it's still fairly new. It has about 70% of the sweetness of sucrose. So most artificial sweeteners are like 100 times, 600 times. This is actually less sweet than sugar. But it only has 0.4 calories per gram as compared to 4 calories per gram with sugar. So the thing about it is the body doesn't metabolize allulose into glucose, so it has little to no effect on blood sugar. It does have some GI symptoms associated, and we'll talk about some of the unique benefits and some of the challenges here in a little bit, but just wanted to mention that. Sugar alcohols, we've got erythritol, xylitol, sorbitol, mannitol. Okay, you can read it. But here's the thing. For all you dog lovers, I'm a dog lover. If you have sugar-free foods with xylitol, it's toxic to your dogs. So just a little public service announcement there. Now, as you look at this list, I'll be honest, neotame, advantame, I don't even think about those. We always talk about aspartame, sucralose, all the other ones, but I really didn't know a lot about those. And the reason why, I think, is because when I looked into them a little further, neotame is in things like chapstick, to make it taste sweet. It is in some baked goods and stuff, but it's more like chewable medicines, like pharmaceuticals will use neotame to sweeten it, to take bitter tastes away. But it is out there and it is being used. Okay. A little more housekeeping. I'm not going to read this slide to you, but we're going to be talking a lot about some of these key organizations. So again, you will have these slides as a reference point. The main one that I want to point out is the joint FAO-WHO Committee on Food Additives. This is an important group. They're a global scientific panel under the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. They're mainly made up of toxicologists, pharmacologists, epidemiologists, nutrition scientists. So I just wanted you to know who's behind the guidelines. So it's all very, very highly qualified people that are way smarter than I could ever think about being. So we have a good group of scientists that are working to look at the studies and keep us safe. So let's take a look at the timeline. So back in the 1970s is when we had our first, what do we want to call it, incident with artificial sweeteners. So saccharin's been around since 1958, but in 1977, saccharin, there was a little bit of an uproar because there was a study that was done that showed that it caused bladder cancer in rats. And under the Delaney Clause, any additive that was causing cancer in animals was considered unsafe. And so the FDA wanted to ban it. Did that happen? Heck no. People were in an uproar. They're like, no, this is our saving grace. This is what we have. You cannot take this away from us. So because this public backlash was so strong, saccharin remained on the market, and Congress allowed it to stay, but they had to put a warning label on it saying, hey, this causes cancer in lab animals. So people continued to enjoy saccharin. So over time, there was human studies found no increased cancer risk, and the mechanistic work showed that rat bladder effect really didn't apply to humans. So we didn't really have anything to worry about. So in 2000, they actually removed it from the carcinogen list, and that warning label was able to be removed as well. All right. Moving forward, you can see the dietary guidelines. I wanted to point this out because there's some confusion. The dietary guidelines for Americans have pretty much for the last more than 10 years, recommended less than 10% of your calories from sugar. So we don't say, oh, you need to eat 10%. Like we're saying, hey, as much as we can limit sugar, like regular old sugar in the diet, that's a positive thing. So that's the dietary guidelines. So I just wanted to point that out and where that fits in. We have the American Diabetes Association, the American Heart Association trying to provide guidance as well. And their recommendation is that non-nutritive sweeteners, and this is back in 2018, can help reduce calorie and sugar intake if used instead of sugary foods. Fast forward to 2021, this is when things started getting interesting. We started having some studies on gut bacteria, so the microbiome and the glucose response in reaction to non-nutritive sweeteners. But at this time, nothing crazy came out. We didn't make any changes at this point. So far, pretty bland, pretty boring. Artificial sweeteners are here, nothing major is happening. If we look at the last couple years, so 2024, FDA and EFSA reaffirmed the safety. They said no new concerns at this point as long as we stay within those acceptable daily intakes. And right now, as of 2025, there's pretty much a balanced professional stance on this. So the American Diabetes Association, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the American Heart Association reinforced that context matters. Non-nutritive sweeteners can definitely help reduce sugary intake. So I think what they're saying here in terms of context matters is, we're not encouraging patients with diabetes to automatically just, hey, let's start drinking diet soda on a regular basis, even if they weren't drinking regular soda. And I think the other piece to this is like, they go to McDonald's and they're like, oh, I'm gonna get the diet pop, but then I'm gonna supersize my food to make up for it. So context matters. So that's what they mean by that. So basically we're saying whole food diet approach at this point, and reducing added sugars is the main goal. And what's to come, I don't know. But I will tell you we have updates as of this Tuesday, just 2 days ago, on recommendations and how artificial sweeteners or non-nutritive sweeteners can impact our health. So one of the theories that I wanted to address here, and this is probably the thing that I hear the most often, is people are saying, do diet drinks cause sugar cravings? So this mismatch hypothesis is, okay, we drink something sweet, but it doesn't have any calories or sugar in it, so it makes our bodies go looking for sugar. Do we have any evidence for this? We don't. We really, really don't. So if we look at any human random clinical trials before and after 2015, nothing tells us that we're having an increase in appetite or calorie intake from drinking diet drinks. Really, overall, we don't have any conclusive evidence that diet drinks trigger sugar cravings. The reason I felt it was important to talk about this today is because any podcast, any health influencer on social media, anybody you listen to that has very strong opinions on this topic will always bring this up. But we don't have the science or the data to back it up yet. I'm not saying it couldn't be true, and maybe down the road if we get enough studies that maybe we could learn that this this is a plausible hypothesis, but at this point, we don't have the data that suggests that. So at this point, here's what we know. Large random clinical trials show that diet drinks reduce weight gain and support weight loss with no evidence of increased sugar cravings. The short-term mechanistic trials highlight possible microbiome or insulin sensitivity effects, but the findings are inconsistent and were also shown in the short term. So again, the claims that diet drinks cause cravings are based on just some theories based on what studies have been done, but we don't have any random clinical trial evidence at this point. All right, so that's kind of laying the groundwork. Now we're going to dive into allulose because it's different, and I think it's worthy of its own little slide, and I want to talk a little bit about it before we move on and talk about the other artificial sweeteners. So allulose is also known as D-allulose. Like I said before, it's pretty rare and it's found in plant foods. It can be commercially produced from corn or fructose, and it only contains about 10% of the calories that sugar does. So like 0.2 to 0.4 calories per gram, where sugar, again, is 4 calories per gram. One thing that's kind of cool is that when it was combined with erythritol, it has the potential, I'm highlighting these words for a reason, to exert a positive effect on our hunger hormone ghrelin. So ghrelin is what makes you want to eat more. And it can actually improve glycemic control. So the FDA has approved allulose as safe for consumption, and it's not widely used yet, but it does have good potential. There are definitely some reasons why it has a lot of potential, and there's also reasons why it's not in all of our food yet. So one of the cool things is that allulose appears to reduce glucose absorption and enhance GLP-1 release. This is likely through effects on the intestinal glucose transport and nutrient sensing. So SGLT2 involvement is suspected but not confirmed, but the actual precise mechanism in humans has not been conclusively proven. So what would be cool about this is if everything pans out, allulose could be a really good tool in helping to stop postprandial blood sugar spikes. And it might even have some other positive impacts. So I thought it was worth noting. Unfortunately, it does have a few downsides, so let's chat about those. It's expensive. So it's expensive to produce, and there's a limited supply. It's not very shelf stable at large amounts. So when it gets up to certain levels, the texture and the quality of the food isn't quite there. So it doesn't meet industry standards for that. And you do have to use more of it since it's not as sweet as sugar. There are some regulatory barriers. It is approved in the US at this point, but not yet in the EU or Canada. Other is just like looks issues, like if when you're making it, like it can cause excessive browning and baking, so it might be fine at home, but again, commercial producers aren't going to want to use that. And then the other kind of big concern is the GI upset. So just like some of the sugar alcohols, allulose can cause some issues with bloating, diarrhea. And this would be comparable. So like if you had one soda, like diet soda with allulose in it, or 2 to 3 small baked goods, that could potentially put you into that GI upset range. So that's the other possible concern with using this. Okay, this next slide is a lot, but it's more like for you to have at home. I'm not going to read it to you. So this just reviews what the acceptable daily intakes are. And I want to just give you a little perspective here, like how do they come up with the ADIs? So basically they're looking at the no observed adverse effect level in the studies that they do. So this is basically the dose that does not produce any adverse health side effects at all. Then they divide it by a safety number or safety factor of 100. So the cans per day is actually 100 times less than what was used in many of the studies. So I tried to equate everything to cans of soda because that's probably where artificial sweeteners are used the most. So you can see when you look at that far column on the right, for aspartame, 15 to 18 cans a day is the acceptable daily intake. Like, that's a lot. I don't know anybody that's doing that. Maybe. And this is based on a 150-pound person. So when you look at the ADI per kilogram of body weight per day, you can see what that would be. So if you wanted to calculate it specifically for yourself, you have that information there. I wanted to do the same thing for a couple packets just so you had a reference point. And again, I don't think anybody's using like 75 packets of equal in a day. That's a lot. Okay, so where do I find these things on a label? You're not going to see them listed on like the actual nutrition facts, but you're going to go down to the ingredients, and this is where you'll find them. So I don't remember what these labels are. I think it's like Diet Coke or Coke Zero. Fun fact, did you know that who knows the reason why they formulated like zero sugar Coke, or is that what it's called, Coke Zero Sugar? Coke Zero. Why did they formulate Coke Zero when they already had Diet Coke? Anybody know? Who said that? Yes, for men, because they're advertising. So men didn't really want to drink the Diet Coke that was for the ladies. They wanted, we had to come up with something different that was more manly, and Coke Zero Sugar is what they promoted instead. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay, so in the ingredients, you can kind of see, I just wanted you to be able to point out where you would find those. So here's the thing. Most people have strong opinions about artificial sweeteners. They're like, those are terrible for you. I'm not eating artificial sweeteners. But then you look at what they're drinking, you look at what they're eating, and you're like, I don't know if you know this, but you're consuming artificial sweeteners on a daily basis. They're in our protein drinks. They're in protein powders. They're in electrolyte drinks, which are becoming very popular. They're in, obviously, the diet drinks. They're in candies now. So you can see Reese's Zero Sugar peanut butter cups. So they're in a lot of different things now, and I don't think people always recognize that. So, as a teaching tool, you can point out on the label where people might find those. Okay. We're going to switch gears now. There was a couple different topics I wanted to cover today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about cancer and artificial sweeteners, diabetes and artificial sweeteners, gut health and artificial sweeteners, and obesity. So let's dive into cancer. Am I done at 11:30? Is that right? Okay, just making sure, determining how fast I need to speak. When it comes to cancer risk, I want to emphasize a very important point. So we have no human randomized clinical control trials showing that any artificial sweetener, whether it's aspartame, sucralose, ACE-K, whatever, increases cancer risk. That's not because researchers haven't tried. It's because true cancer outcomes would require very large trials with decades of follow-up, which just isn't quite practical at this point. It may be someday, but right now we just don't have it. So instead, what we rely on are hazard classifications and risk assessments. So in 2023, the International Agency for Research on Cancer labeled aspartame as possibly carcinogenic. So remember, that's a hazard-based classification. It means aspartame could cause cancer under certain conditions, not that it does cause cancer in patients drinking diet soda. So why do they think that? Why does everybody think that artificial sweeteners cause cancer? Well, you remember back in the 70s when we had to put that label on saccharin, that was ingrained in many people's brains, and we're kind of at a point of too little too late. Also, just a personal opinion, when you call something artificial, that doesn't frame it in the most positive way. So it's an artificial sweetener, and as we've progressed through the years, artificial, people really don't like that these days. So that's, I think, part of it. So if randomized clinical control trials don't show, or RCTs don't show cancer risk, why do patients and even some professionals still worry about this? It's because of findings from observational and mechanistic studies that end up making the headlines. So sensational news, we already talked about social media and the influencers. They latch on to one little piece of a headline and they blow it out of proportion. Now, are there some legitimate things that we should pay attention to? Heck yeah, there are. Like, an example is this Nutrinet Santé study from 2022. It was a large prospective study that people who consumed higher amounts of aspartame and ACE-K, which is in like every diet drink, they had a slightly increased risk of developing cancer overall. But remember, it's observational, so it can suggest an association, but it cannot prove causation. The second example, and this is probably more recent, and I think you will remember this one, it was done at NC State University in 2023, and they focused on sucralose. And the research reported that when sucralose is metabolized, a compound called sucralose 6-acetate is formed. And sucralose 6-acetate is a genotoxic chemical. So what does that mean? It means it can damage the DNA, and this can actually increase risk of cancer. Now, they also found small amounts of this compound in commercial sucralose products. That was a little controversial because Splenda said, no, we didn't put any of that in there. Anyway, we won't get into that either. But basically, in test tubes, this metabolite, the sucralose 6-acetate, caused DNA strands to break in the human blood cell. And in gut cell models, sucralose exposure was actually shown to loosen those tight junctions of the intestine. So when you think about the intestine, like there shouldn't be holes. That's not good. But what can happen is those junctions can loosen up a little bit, and they call this intestinal permeability. A slang for that is leaky gut. So that's also a possible situation with sucralose. So again, I cannot stress enough that these don't mean that sucralose causes cancer, but they do generate some hypotheses, and they most certainly generate a buzz in the media. So let's talk about hazard and risk for a second, because this, I think, could be helpful when you're talking with patients about non-nutritive sweeteners, artificial sweeteners. So hazard does not equal risk. So hazard means, can it cause harm under some conditions? So an example would be sunlight can cause skin cancer. And the risk is, what is the likelihood of harm at typical exposure? And the example here would be moderate daily sunlight, very low cancer risk. Make sense? Okay. Here's another one. You're not going to like this one, okay? But we're just going to talk about it anyway. So, hazard. Alcohol is a known carcinogen. In the International Agency for Research on Cancer, they have it labeled as a group 1, meaning it has the potential to cause cancer. But again, risk is about how likely the harm is at real-world exposure. So someone drinking several glasses of whatever, vodka, wine, beer, whatever, for decades carries a much higher risk than someone who has the occasional glass of wine. So we want to think about artificial sweeteners in the same way. So a hazard classification like the IARC's possibly carcinogenic for aspartame doesn't mean diet soda is giving our patients cancer. It just means the potential exists. Are we good? Are you following? Okay, I feel like I'm beating it to death. But this question comes up. Now you're like, okay, well, what else? What else is on this list? So I thought I would just show you some examples. So if you look at group 1, so carcinogenic to humans, there's evidence in humans or strong evidence with a relevant mechanism identified. Examples are alcohol, tobacco, processed meats, asbestos. 2A, we have red meat, shift work, glyphosate. 2B, aspartame, that's where that one pops in, aloe vera, whole leaf, I know, pickled vegetables. You have so many questions. I know. Go to the IARC website. You can read more about it. I cannot dive into all of this in the talk today. But I wanted, again, to give you a little bit of perspective. Okay. So let's chat about obesity. I'm going to try to start speeding things up here. So this slide basically summarizes what RCT trials tell us about weight and artificial sweeteners across multiple 6 to 12 month trials. When we replaced sugary drinks with artificially sweetened beverages, they actually saw modest and consistent weight benefit. So there was a benefit. A year-long trial, 2024, showed that adults with overweight and obesity actually maintained slightly more weight loss when they drank diet beverages compared to water. We could certainly speculate on why that is. Water can be kind of boring to some people, so a diet drink might feel more like a treat, and it also keeps them off the pop. But here the differences are small, like 1 to 2 kilograms over a year, but they are consistent. So this slide is for you. This is not, I'm not going to present on this. This is so that you can see the topics, what evidence we have, and the clinical takeaways for you. Do non-nutritive sweeteners cause diabetes? Again, no human random clinical trials with incident type 2 diabetes as an endpoint for aspartame, sucralose, ACE-K, stevia, etc. But sucralose is kind of interesting. So sucralose, which is Splenda, in a small crossover study, when people ingested sucralose before they did an oral glucose tolerance test, it actually increased insulin and altered glucose handling in the short term. So if you've ever had patients say, well, I think, when I put Splenda in my coffee, it affects my blood sugar, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but there may be some validity to that. Again, insulin sensitivity with sucralose specifically has been studied. Again, we don't have any conclusive evidence at this point. Gut microbiome. So this is a huge topic, and I feel like you're probably all fairly well informed on the gut microbiome, but I just want to point out, everything affects your gut bacteria. How much sleep you got, what your stress was, how much you're exercising, all of those things, all different additives in foods. So in this trial, some people consuming saccharin, sucralose, aspartame, and stevia showed changes in blood sugar control and the gut microbiome while others didn't. And that's the hard thing, is every single one of us in here, if we did a map of your gut to see what bacteria, everybody's is so different. So it's not shocking to see that everybody had a different response. Okay, we're almost there. We got to talk about heart health real quick, because this is a big one. So people come to me, they say, I heard that artificial sweeteners can impact heart health. Again, we have no random clinical, you know what I'm going to say every time. We have no RCTs to show this. So here's the thing. Most random clinical trials on sweeteners use surrogate outcomes like A1C or insulin sensitivity, not long-term clinical outcomes like diabetes complications or heart disease. So again, we haven't been able to truly determine that cause and effect. Here's what the cardiovascular story gets confusing for patients and even clinicians. So on the observational side, large cohort studies like the Nutrinet Santé have reported higher cardiovascular risk, especially for stroke, among people with higher artificial sweetener intake. But these studies can't prove causation, which we know. People who already have obesity or diabetes are more likely to choose diet beverages, which can make the association look worse than it is. On the randomized trial side, where we actually substitute sugar-sweetened drinks with artificial drinks, the evidence is consistently neutral or even modestly favorable. We see small reductions in blood pressure, similar or slightly better in weight maintenance, and no adverse lipid patterns. Importantly, no trial has shown an increase in the cardiovascular events. So the takeaway is the observational studies raise the hypotheses, but the random clinical trials are going to be more reliable. When patients swap sugar-sweetened beverages for artificial ones, the cardiovascular impact is neutral. I know, not what you wanted to hear. Or maybe it is. I don't know. It depends on where you stand. This was another really big one with erythritol, the sugar alcohol. So a 2023 New England Journal of Medicine study found that higher blood erythritol levels were linked with 3-year risk of a greater 3-year risk of heart attack, stroke, or death. The lab work showed about 30 grams of erythritol could raise levels enough to increase platelet stickiness for more than 48 hours. But here's the thing, erythritol can be produced in your body. I gotta look at my notes because we're gonna go to biochemistry here in a minute. Let's see, here it is. There's no way I would remember this. So erythritol can be produced via the pentose phosphate pathway. Who remembers that? Oh, good for you. Like one of you. Good job. I do not. I do not remember that. That's been too long. But it does it especially in people with insulin resistance. So these participants were already older. They were high cardiac risk. They were not representative of the general population. And the 30-gram dose was actually much higher than a typical daily intake of someone, which would be more like 5 to 15 grams of erythritol. So it really is hard to generalize these findings to even younger, healthier individuals who are drinking diet sodas or eating keto foods or whatever, with sugar alcohols or specifically erythritol. So high blood levels may actually reflect a metabolic dysfunction, not sweetener consumption. And the study did not fully adjust for diet, comorbidities, or other risk factors that might explain the plasma erythritol and the higher CVD risk. So there's that. Last but not least, a small 2024 trial confirmed increased platelet reactivity after one erythritol drink, but no events were measured. So we really do need some more studies on this. So I showed you the studies here. I kind of circled my concerns so that you could take a look at those later on. We're almost there. So here's what I typed into ChatGPT because I think this is important. It's really small. I typed in, are artificial sweeteners worse for you than sugar? I can't read what it says. It's very small. Too much added sugar. So really when I look at it, it doesn't look favorable. Do you think AI likes artificial sweeteners? Can you guys read it? You read it for you. You're old like me? Okay. Too much added sugar contributes to obesity, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, liver disease, heart disease, and dental cavities. Do we know that to be true? Too much added sugar. Yeah, that feels like that makes sense, right? Does that feel true to everybody? Are you paying attention? Okay. All right, I'm just looking for you to raise your hand. All right, so added sugar we know causes some of these issues. Now let's go down to risk of artificial sweeteners. Some research links common artificial sweeteners such as erythritol to an increased risk of heart attack and stroke. Uh-oh. That is not what I just told you, is it? Okay, so when our patients are doing these searches online, this is the stuff that they're seeing. And honestly, based on how you ask it, like, is there anything good about artificial sweeteners? If we asked it that way, we would probably get a way different answer. So we can persuade AI to tell us what we want to hear, okay? So it's all in how you ask it. So I wanted to just put this up here for you so that you know what your patients are looking at, and they're trying to go to Dr. ChatGPT to fix them and tell them what's best. Okay, so just in the last few months, we've got some new interesting data popping up. You know what I'm gonna say, so I'm not even gonna say it, but it's stuff that we need to maybe start paying attention to. So cognitive risk signal, higher intake of low or no calorie sweeteners and sugar alcohols associated with faster cognitive decline. Interesting. Again, we're back at the cancer and sweeteners. The umbrella review found no strong overall association between cancer and sweetener intake. Metabolic neutral findings, but these beverages did not significantly influence metabolic risk. And then last but not least, there reviewed affirmed possible systemic effects, looking at gut metabolism, taste signaling, and basically it's what we've said the whole entire time today: we need more robust human trials. So this just in on Tuesday, just 2 days ago, this just in. So this is what I got in my email box. At the top of it, it said sweetened and diet drinks tied to fatty liver disease. Ooh, that's interesting. And then it goes on to tell you all about that. So really what happened is this new UK biobank study looked at over 120,000 people for more than 10 years, which is good. They looked at sugar sweetened and low or no sugar sweetened beverages. And they were linked with a higher risk of metabolic associated steatotic liver disease. I was worried I wasn't going to say that right. The risk increase, so it's the new NAFLD. It used to be NAFLD, and now what do we say? MAFLD. MAFLD. It's hard to say whether you say it or you say the abbreviation. But the risk was around 50% for sugary drinks and 60% for diet drinks. So with diet beverages also tied to higher liver-related mortality. So that kind of is interesting to me. So somebody could look at this and say, oh, I got to protect my liver. I'm going to drink regular pop instead of diet. Okay, now maybe you wouldn't say that, but I guarantee you there's going to be some headline in USA News Today or some kind of publication that's going to say, did you know diet drinks are worse for the liver than regular drinks? And it's going to get a little bit blown out of proportion. The thing that you need to pay attention to is this is 9+ ounces per day of diet drinks. So somebody has to be drinking at least a can of diet pop a day, every day or more. So that's one thing to look at, or sugar-sweetened beverages. So I think what's interesting about this is it does help us kind of put things in perspective. So I'm going to go back to that slide about alcohol because I really do think this can help us talk to patients about this a little bit better. But remembering that there's a place and time, right? So we're not going to be drinking wine 2 a day every day because it's supposed to be good for heart health. Like alcohol does have some legitimate risks. So we use it in moderation, whatever that might look like for ourselves or our patients. And it's the same thing in terms of artificial sweeteners or non-nutritive sweeteners. So here's 5 points to think about when we talk to our patients. So first, diet drinks, artificial sweeteners can be a weight control tool when they're used to replace sugary drinks. So if we didn't drink soda to begin with, we're not going to say, ooh, diet soda is going to help me lose weight and manage diabetes. Second, they generally have glycemic neutrality, so they're probably not going to make your blood sugars go up. But you know what? We have CGMs now, so we can look. If somebody is noticing a trend, they're just drinking their coffee with their sucralose and they notice it go up, you can say, oh, I wish we could blame it on the Splenda, but we could also probably blame it on the caffeine causing some insulin resistance. So we really don't know unless we just want to drink a packet of sucralose and test it, which sounds disgusting. Anyway, so patients can make, and if they decide, no, it's this sweetener that's making my sugar, more power to them. You don't have to have artificial sweeteners to survive. Individual response, so we talked a little bit about that. Short-term safety data. So again, we don't know. Like 5 years from now, I could give this talk and it could be completely different with completely different results. But what we know now is patients can use them or not use them. I know, that's so sad. You were like, oh, what's it going to be? What's the answer? And it's a really terrible movie ending. I'm sorry. But I'm going to fast forward. I just heard a patient say this a couple weeks ago. They said, well, I'm not using artificial sweeteners because I've done my own research. Now, let me preface this with they were drinking like 4 pops a day. Okay, so they're drinking regular soda. And what I wanted to say was, well, have you done your research on the regular soda? But I did not. I did not. That's not how I was trained. That's not what I said. So I wrote out what we should all say, and it's hard. It's hard to say these things, but you could say, it sounds like you've taken time to look into this on your own and you want to make the best decisions for your health. That's really important. I'm curious, when you think about sticking with regular soda, what do you see as the benefits? And what are some of the downsides for you personally? Now, you can add your own flavor to this, but you get the idea. Not going to read this all because I'm running out of time, but I thought that that could be helpful. So I think what I want to say is use them or lose them. It doesn't matter. It's going to be different for each person, but I think the key is helping patients put it into perspective. And I think our best comparison to help patients really understand truly is alcohol, at least for our adult patients over 21. The sunshine might be another one if you're having a conversation with somebody younger. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to take those now. We have about 2 minutes. Any questions? Yes?
Go for it. Someone go.
No, thank you.
Yeah, green light's on.
Okay, so it is on. No, thank you. I think one of the challenges here is we're trying to describe individual nutrition level in a public health context. And it's super challenging when we have a public that thinks that they're literate in science, but haven't had the opportunity to learn how controlled trials work. Only reason I know is I have a master's degree. That's not fair for all this information that's going out to people's lives. But my question is, how do you respond to the pushback of the food industry is buying and paying for all the studies, or the sugar industry is fueling all the studies? Like, why should I trust the science? Because I think I know one of the answers is have a relationship, but how do we empower customer owners or people in our communities to have these conversations and feel empowered with all the misinformation?
Yeah, I love that question, and I have no idea. I really don't. Like, I struggle with it every single day because you feel like, okay, I'm only one person, and these health influencers get out there and they're like, look at yellow dye, whatever, it's not in the EU. It's like, yes, it is. It's in the foods. Like, this is not a big, like, it's everywhere. So I don't know. I mean, I know there's a lot of like PhD, MD, RD, MS people online trying to put good information, trying to infuse that information back in, but it is really, really hard. And you automatically put people on the defensive if you're like, well, where'd you get that? What's your source? And yeah, like it's one of those things where when people have their opinions, that's what they believe, and I don't think there's much changing. I would love to hear from anyone else that has an opinion or maybe feels like they have an answer for that. Yes?
Wait. Use the mic so I can hear you online.
I would say just go natural. Use allulose or monk fruit and just go as natural as you can.
Yeah. I mean, yes, but again, we don't have a lot of studies. So that's what's interesting is we make the sucralose and the aspartame the villain, but stevia and monk fruit and allulose, because they're natural, they're the safe ones. Well, we still don't have all the studies on those yet. So a part of it, I think, is we call them artificial sweeteners, like we talked about. It just has a negative connotation. And natural is always better, but like dog poop, arsenic, these are all natural things. We consuming those? Nope. So, yeah, I hear you.
All right. Thank you, Angela.
All right. Thanks,
Love it.
everyone.